So, okay. So, go ahead. I'm sorry. I should have thought of that earlier, but go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think that kind of describes like my personal role at the Cedar Falls School District. But I would say specifically, like my role is not for security, and I think that that's um something people think. Obviously, if I'm there and something happened, I'm an aid in that way, but my role and no part of my like day-to-day operations is based on like providing security necessarily for the school.
Okay. Ryan, do you want to briefly describe your role then?
Yeah, no problem. I'm in my third year now with in the schools with Waterloo Police Department and Waterloo School District. My role has, a lot to do with exactly what Liesl said. My role does take a little more of a security um task. Um, Safety and security within the schools and, during the school day and during school events. Um, our roles in Waterloo, we don't really do too much educating within the classrooms. We're more there for, informal counseling, and basically there to make those connections with students, which is something that I do through like participating like during like I'll go down and play basketball with kids during physical education, kickball, stuff like that. And I pop in, from time to time into different classes to say hi and see how things are going and just kind of be there, be seen and be there for kids for them to come in and talk to.
So, uh, what do you think, in your experience, is the best reason for having school resource officers assigned to the schools?
Definitely, there's a couple of great reasons, but I think the best reason is to, bridge that gap, make the connections with students so that they can see that, um, you know, officers are people too, and just to try and gain their trust, have a better trust and better relationship between officers and students so that they can, continue that trust and continue those relationships into their adult lives. Um, but also I'm a big proponent to um, providing, excellent security at the school, and, for the safety of students and staff. That's definitely the number two reason to be in there.
How about you, Liesl?
I will pick something different so that I don't reiterate because I think Ryan and I would agree on a lot of things. I would say another good reason would be having that truly taking upon that liaison role. So being available for students to come ask questions, whether that be legal questions, DHS questions, driving, like speeding ticket, like the amount of questions we get from kids of like, my parent does this at home and I don't know if it's right or not, or what do I do if my sister's vaping in the house and they're underage? Kind of being that catch all. We're not a counselor, we're not the principal. Once they get to know us, we're not necessarily like getting them in trouble, but being that other person to kind of like bounce these things off that would generally arise as like a criminal matter. Just being that person they can ask so they can understand and have an actual answer instead of them Googling it or assuming or making something else up in their heads.
Okay, very, very important liaison. Okay, so then, what kind of training did both of you receive in terms of in order to become a school resource officer? Lisa, you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, so before I got into school, there's NASRO, it's the National Association of School Resource Officers. I went to our basic training, and I think they're 4 or 5 days. It felt like a week, I think. But it's a basic training and it goes over like juvenile law, some of the responsibilities of, school resource officers. And I think the best part was getting together with other officers who were jumping into that role as SRO. I would say 6 months later, I went to the advanced school. which talked to us more about CPTED, which is the crime prevention through environmental design. So talking about the way your school's built, maybe some of the things that are outside, things to look for. Some just provided more training, more in depth on being within the school, and everyone at that training had been there in the schools for a year or so, which was nice. So we all had experiences to draw back on, and we made presentations to provide better security for the schools. So essentially that kind of prepped us for that. I got my ALICE certification, so I'm an ALICE instructor for the area. I feel like there's like 3 other things I did the advanced CTK interview and interrogations that went over talking to juveniles relating to crimes. So knowing our Miranda rights and how they differ for juveniles versus if it's a forcible felony, some things like that. I think were all really important, but I think and I went to the FBI put on a forum on the school shooting events. And so there was just like multiple speakers, like Parkland, the chief of Parkland came and talked to us, and the FBI talked to us about some other incidents, the Tennessee one. And so we just sat there and talked about security, things that we're doing to prevent it and to further my own education on it as I was entering a building instead of like a city for the whole day of my shift.
Okay. Brian?
Well, I have also been to the it's a week-long school. I believe it was 40 hours for the basic NASRO school resource officer training. I've yet to go to the advanced course. Sounds like that's a little more in depth, and that's that's a goal of mine, is to get to that course, get to that training. I've got almost 21 years with Waterloo Police Department, so I go back on a lot of my experience, working the streets and stuff like that. But I've also been to the CTK. I had not been to the advanced course for that either, but that we draw a lot of knowledge from that in dealing with, talking with juveniles, and like Liesl said, Miranda, and just being able to give them advice, know, like she said, for when to speak with juveniles on their own, or when you can speak, when you have to get a parent, as far, and when they can be dealt with as forcible felonies 16 and up. There's a lot of the same things that she's been through, I've been through as well.
What does CTK stand for?
Oh God, that's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. It's a lot of interview and interrogation. I can't remember what it stands for.
I'm looking it up right now.
Okay, well, I just wondered, that was an acronym that I guess most of us are not familiar with. So
I think it's just an acronym for their names. The 3 DCI agents that came up with the program.
So this is DCI. This was done by state agents then, or was it?
Yeah, there's state DCI agents that they've kind of formed their own group, and they go around throughout the nation, basically teaching how to teaching interview and interrogation. They've got they have a baseball diamond step process. I have the diagram out in my truck. Otherwise I would show it, but they just show how to follow a step process on how to get somebody to confess to a crime.
Mm-hmm.
And they dive into juvenile interrogations and questioning as well.
So what do you consider the best part of your job then, either of you?
Oh, I definitely, the best part is the connections I have made in the last 3 years. I mean, definitely see a difference. I'm closer with the community that I work in now than I ever have been in the last 21 years. And it's because of being in the schools and getting to know the students, and getting to know some of their families as well. I think that's been the best part of this whole process, the whole position.
How about you, Liesl?
I'd agree. Obviously, I've been in the schools for 3 years as well, and just knowing the kids and seeing them change from sophomores to seniors, and then running into them, after they've graduated and catching up. I just ran into someone who graduated yesterday at a store working the checkout, and she wanted to come visit me at the high school again. So, just all those relationships, like you said, we meet the parents, all the staff. We might go through a little bump in the road every once in a while, but if you do your job right, I think, and you're respectful, you just make these awesome relationships that later on they forget the things that they might have did in high school.
Agreed.
Okay, so what if there's one thing you could change about your role, what would that be?
Uh,
That's
you
hard.
know, I mean, that is a good question. I tried to think about something today, going over these questions. Um, if there's something I could change, if I didn't have to, you know, arrest kids, that'd be great if I didn't have to do any of that.
So how often would you say you make an arrest?
Um, it's not very often. I operate on the lines of, I like to give a big benefit of a doubt to, to students, to young people, because I know everybody makes mistakes. So, I try not to, you know, what's the word I want to say, put the hammer down, um, on minor things. Obviously, there's times where, I've had to handle some assaults, stuff like that, where I have no choice but to file, charges if the victim and their family wants that to be done. So there's sometimes where my hands are tied, but I always try to kind of coach, kind of be more of a life coach, for the students if they make a wrong choice, if I can do that.
How about you, Liesl?
Well, I selfishly would like some other school resource officers in Cedar Falls so that I'm not spread so thin. And I think just if there was two of us, or even if I taught more, maybe I could just be in the schools a little bit more and just continue working on relationships. But I'm just making different programs now instead. So I'm figuring it out. But I would like like a coworker to do it all with me.
So you have Ryan, you have a resource officer at East and West, and then you have one at Central too, right?
Yeah, we have a total of 6 school resource officers and then 1 school resource officer supervisor. That was a position that was just recently added back to the unit. So we have myself at East, another at West, and then Central, Hoover, and Carver, and then Expo High School as well, which covers some middle school as well.
Okay. So then, of course, as we're all aware, the students from communities with historically strained relationships with the police department have come sometimes very much distrust law enforcement. Can you talk about your relationship with those kinds of students?
Yeah,
Ryan?
definitely. Kind of the way I operate, what I tell the students, if there's ever a time where I have to, handle something, an incident during the school, I always tell them, I said, I'm always going to treat you with respect. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm always going to do my job. And I think a majority of the students there have respected that. And then just putting myself out there in the halls, walking with the students, talking with them on a daily basis, just getting to know, trying my best to get to know each and every one of them. Obviously that's going to be very, almost impossible to get to know everybody, but I think putting myself out there with them and interacting with them anytime I can. Lunchtime, I'll go and sit with some students. We have 3 lunches, so I'll go down and sit with them and chat with them, see how their day is going. And like I mentioned earlier, I think a big part of being able to make these connections is getting down into PE class, physical education class, and playing basketball, playing kickball, dodgeball, all that stuff. I think that's been one of the biggest things that has helped me to, you know, kind of break that barrier, break the ice a little bit.
So Liesl, do you play dodgeball too, or?
Begged elementary kids to invite me to gym class. I would do anything to play dodgeball again.
Hey, one of these days we'll invite you over.
Oh god. um I I would like to play in gym class, but I would say to work on like specifically like the strained police relations. First off, being in now at 3 years, I think Ryan and I probably both have a lot different perspective than our first year. Our first year is hard. The kids don't know us, we don't know them. I'd say both of us sitting now are third year, the kids they trust us. They will come to us. They're used to seeing us in the hallway. They've had conversations with us before. So time's a huge one. You can't force people to trust you, but just being available, having an open door, and like he said, like putting yourself out there, like, you know, I working the football games, seeing them there, walking the hallways, talking to them, you know, we make it like a joke kind of thing every morning to staff, but we stand in the same area and we'll see how many kids we can get to say good morning back to us. Like we're forcing those conversations, and just being available. And I know personally, it would have been 3.5 years ago now, we did a Zoom, and some of the students on the Zoom, it was during COVID, were with the Black Student Union at Cedar Falls High School. And they made it, this was prior to me being the SRO given. They made it very clear that they just didn't understand the role. They felt like it was uncomfortable. They didn't like it. And I made it a point when I became the SRO, I went up and thanked them for sharing how they felt. And I told them, if you guys ever have questions about like what I'm doing or like where I'm at and things like that, like come talk to me. And those students specifically that were in the Zoom, I'll never forget, like I just remember them coming into my office one day and talking to me about some home life problems. And I knew in that moment that like that wasn't an issue anymore. The way they felt prior, like they felt good enough to come into my office and shut the door and talk to me. And that took time. And I said hi, I said good morning every morning, I smiled. Like time and just being available and being around, I think is huge. And I think I can speak for both of us, where now looking at it 3 years down the line, so much has changed. And that's what's fun about working with kids, and the same kids every year until they graduate, obviously, is like seeing that adjustment in their openness to you and your openness to them.
Well, now
I
now we come-
100% agree.
now we come to the tough question, which is there's been a lot of criticism nationally that having police officers in the school has often tended to criminalize behavior that would otherwise be considered a matter of school discipline, and that it can lead to more kids being sort of in some sense funneled into the criminal justice system, where before there would have been, those would have been handled pretty much internally by the schools. I mean, obviously schools have sanctions like suspensions and expulsions and so forth, but so how do you respond to that kind of criticism? Because it's out there in the literature about school resource officers. So I don't know which one of you wants to go first on that one, but
I can go.
okay.
So the question, the first part, I thought about this earlier, you know, does an SRO reduce criminal activity? I would say no. I don't think that my presence, if any police presence reduced criminal activity, then we wouldn't have crime. So me strictly being in the school, I would say, is not necessarily reducing anything. They still have fights. They still bring in weed when they want to. It's always going to be a thing, whether they get caught or not, whether that's in school, I think, or in life. So in general, I would not say it reduces criminal activity. And I think that the leading to greater arrest, is it possible? Yes. I think it totally depends on the program. So I know, and Ryan we work together, obviously, and like we've done a really good job in our community. Because I think there's so many of us that really enjoy what we do and enjoy our kids and want to do our best work for them and see our purpose in our job. So I think that we also all want to create a job security of like, we see the important part of this. We would never want to throw that away or burn our reputation of being good school resource officers. So we work pretty closely. We have a monthly meeting now, all of us school resource officers talking about incidents, making sure we're kind of all handling them the same, meeting with JCS monthly to meet those standards, but also setting a bar with your school administration on what you're going to deal with and what you're not is really important. You know, I think sometimes people can get too involved if they're just like in the principal's office, like, oh, what's going on? And they try to involve themselves in, but I would say probably both of us, I would tell the school administration when I shouldn't be involved and when I should be involved. We know ourselves when it's criminal and when it's not criminal, and we should not be handling petty things that could be handled within the school. I also push pretty heavily that things should be handled by the school first, and then if we have continued problems, if it actually does hit the criteria of a crime, then that's when it should come to us. So we're not always handling those first offense things. Another thing that I would speak on is that, and I think Ryan kind of mentioned it earlier, I think we both take a very restorative approach. So I am totally comfortable talking to kids and their families about what could have happened, right? Like the things that you did could have had this consequence, and we don't want that for you. Like I am so thankful that I'm able to have this conversation with you today, and hopefully we can learn from it, and I don't want to have to deal with this again. So explaining what the consequences could be, especially as they get older, you know, the closer they get to 18, the less options we have. We've also created I don't know if you guys started using it yet, like a diversion program. So it's online classes that cover, like I used it today for 3 kids that would generally get disorderly conduct for fighting in school. We're giving them a class online about anger management. So that way we're not having to go with any criminal charges, and we're at least able, I mean, on paper, it looks good too, you know, and I acknowledge that if I charged every kid that participated in a fight, I would have some insane numbers probably going on, and I don't want that either. So I love selfishly and purposefully, which is why we've set it up, saying that we are diverting kids and that we're giving them other options before they're hitting the criminal justice system.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, that's one thing that we'll probably have to talk about there, Liesl, is that diversion program, because we really don't have a diversion program that we're using for, you know, like disorderly conducts or fights. And you know, fights they happen more often than you think, which is, I hate to say, but they do. And when, you know, I try to, like she said, you know, from an SRO standpoint, I try to let the school handle things. I try to step back and, you know, just be there if need be. I've broken up fights before and kind of passed off the students to administration when everything calms down, and let those students talk with administration, and administrators talk to the students' families. And like she said, you know, tell them what could have happened in that situation, instead of just outright charging anybody and everybody that is involved in a fight, or that has a vape pen, or, you know, anything else.
Okay. So your tendency is to try to let the schools handle it first rather than you're getting involved.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So under what circumstances would lead to an arrest then?
You know, the way I operate is, if, you know, if there's a major disruption, or if it's an ongoing, like if it doesn't stop once staff tries to intervene, you know, then you kind of have to step in and take action. Like I said, we try to, you know, if things can get be ended and calmed down within a quick period of time, then I can stay back and not have to step in.
And I would say that I do have one rule that I sometimes forget that I've made a rule, but I've never arrested a kid in the school. I would never, unless I obviously had to, for a means of like restraint, but I never have. I would never make them leave the school in handcuffs. I've always sent them home with their parents, like they would for a school suspension, essentially. And I would meet with the family when the parent, like, say there was a fight today, parents obviously get called in because there was a fight. I would tell them, I would either meet with them that day and tell them the possible consequences, once it's determined, or I would set up a date outside of school. I would never, and that's I never set up a time to arrest a kid if they need booked in during the school day. So it might sit for a month. If they have a PD day a month later, then we will wait till that day to handle the arrest if I actually have to take them over to the Black Hawk County Jail, so that the students are never missing school. My philosophy is if they're in school, that's where they're supposed to be. So I want them to stay there, and I just will always handle things, whether that's on the weekend or a day that they don't have school, so that they're never missing school for anything criminal related.
Well, so far I've been asking all the questions, and I want to let other folks in the audience ask questions, but I will ask one more. You said you meet with the juvenile court services. I assume you run into kids that are already involved in the juvenile system that are in school, right?
Yep.
And so,
Yes.
what do you tend to meet with JCS about them or others or what?
Sometimes it's nice to have that open communication. Some kids need more accountability than others, and sometimes JCS is that form. Sorry, my dog's chewing on a bone. That other form of accountability. So that sometimes their PO, I would say, commonly is that one person they really listen to. So keeping them involved in their school life, and just sometimes we are just that bridge of like, hey, like Ryan's doing great this week. He came to the office upset, but he left on his own terms and he went back to class. It's not bad. And I would say the thing we're meeting with JCS about is making sure we are getting them the correct information. And like I said, opening that communication of like, we've had this history with this kid, us sending a criminal complaint to them. If we send a criminal complaint for disorderly, that's all they read. So they don't know that I've met with this kid once a week for the last month, and this is his home life, and this is this. So they're taking that criminal complaint and kind of starting from scratch. So just keeping that communication alive has been huge, I think, in letting us know that we can communicate beyond paperwork being faxed back and forth from our departments, so that we can work together better to serve the kids better.
Okay. What about you, Ryan?
Exactly what she said. That's, it's been a minute since I've been able to actually get to one of these meetings. But it's very helpful to be able to meet with them and discuss what's going on. And there's oftentimes too where probation officers, juvenile courts, probation officers will be up at the school to to take time to meet with their students that that they're assigned to as well. So I often get to see them during that time and discuss what's going on.
And I'd like to add quick that prior to us meeting with JCS as of a couple months ago, the diversion program that I'm now using like daily, literally, was only being used by JCS. So JCS was using it after we sent criminal complaints, then they were issuing these classes for them, where now I can issue them the class within the school district and no paperwork ever make it to JCS. So they've opened that opportunity to us. So they have more resources sometimes than we know about. So being able to, like I said, open that communication has been huge.
All right. Well, I've asked all the questions now. Now I'll open it up to other folks that are on the call who want to ask a question. You can raise your little yellow hand in the corner and I'll call on you.
It's me, Pappy.
Kate, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. other folks have questions. This is a chance to learn about what these folks do.
I raised my hand, but I don't think you saw it, Al.
All right, go ahead, Lisa.
So this is Lisa. Sorry you guys can't see my face. I do recognize Ryan from when I worked at Seeds of Hope, which is a long time ago. But congratulations on your baby, Ryan.
Oh,
Lisa,
thank you.
do you think you remember me, Lisa, when I worked at Seeds of Hope as an advocate? A domestic violence advocate. Sexual assault advocate. No, you might not remember me. Anyway,
Are you talking to me or Lizel?
you, Ryan.
Ryan.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. So you both of you guys said that so there's resource officers at the middle schools and the high schools, right?
Correct.
Okay. So Lisa, you said that yours is more education and they're all in Cedar Falls.
Yeah, I'm the only one in Cedar Falls.
Yeah, do you know why that is? Like, why are you the only one with, because how many schools is it in Cedar Falls that need a
10.
resource? Yeah, that's just too much for one person.
Amen. Why? I think it's been a lack of communication, some sort between the city and the school district. The city has to ask the school district for more money.
Okay.
But we are in the process of getting a second one because within the last couple council this year, I think that before I go into the new high school next year, I think we'll either have a second one if we have the staffing for it at the department, or we will, the minute we get the staffing, we'll have that second body, which is going to be a huge start so that we can spend more time in the junior highs.
Okay. So are there resource officers in the middle schools in Waterloo?
Ryan.
Yes, there's Carver Middle School, Hoover, and then Central Middle School. There's each one has their own school resource officer.
Okay, so in those middle schools, are those resource officers more like Liesel's, like the education part, and not like you, security?
Well, I would say none of us really are involved in teaching classes per se. We're just there. We're more for like informal counseling, and just to, to speak with students, bridge that gap. I know, back a long time ago, our people used to teach DARE, but have kind of moved away from that.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I'm not exactly sure why. That why that's been, well, why we moved away from it. But since I've been involved, we don't do any educating it within the classrooms. Unless,
Okay.
I guess, I've had teachers ask, hey, can you come in and talk about, like Miranda rights and, when that needs to be used, when an officer would need to read somebody their Miranda rights, and police questions, stuff like that. I've gone into classrooms and talked about.
Okay, so, but you really don't know why the difference between Cedar Falls and Waterloo middle schools, why they have a different approach. And if so, who would you speak to about that? Like if a parent or teachers wanted to know, we want more for our middle schools, this is what we want. We want the same thing as Cedar Falls schools does. Like who would that person be for parents to talk to get something like that started? Because I'm not for sure why there's such a difference in the middle school. I mean, I sort of can see like scaring middle school students with the officer type of situation. But if Cedar Falls is doing it, why come Waterloo is not doing it for the middle schools?
Well, first off, I don't like the word scare. We're not in the business of trying to,
Yeah, I know you're
scare.
not, but I'm just saying from a child's point of view, like, are you guys in regular clothes, or do you have to wear like a uniform?
We used we used to wear our regular Waterloo Police Department uniform. that my first year is I was in the uniform the whole year. The following school year, we did switch to we wear khaki pants and black t-shirt, black long sleeve shirt. But we still have, you know, our duty gear as far as belt, vest, all of that stuff, because you know, we have to be ready for, you know, the unexpected. We have to still be available for that. And plus we are still used within the community as well. 50-50 with Waterloo schools, and still, you know, have to respond to stuff outside of the schools if need
Oh,
be.
right,
We're
right.
kind of, you know, last ditch, effort to, you know, get some help out in the community, you
Okay,
know, because we always we want to stay in the schools. We want to
okay.
be in there. So, and as far as, you know, getting some educating going, that's something I can bring up with my supervisor. And, you know, obviously, and there's lots of educational programs out there for school resource officers to
Okay,
use.
okay. I just got I got two more questions, but they're really short. Out of all the resource officers that you guys have, do you have any Blacks or Latino resource officers?
We do not, sorry, we do not in Waterloo.
And Cedar Falls either?
I'm it. So this is what you got.
So why is that? Because if you're dealing with those different populations, I'm not understanding why. I mean, it could be money reasons or whatever, but why don't you have students that, I mean, why don't you have staff that look like the students that you guys are working with?
That's a little, it's out of our,
That's like a chief question.
well, and the officers have to put in for it.
Oh,
too.
okay.
It's we're not appointed, you know, like I was interested in working with juveniles. I put in for it. I interviewed for it. I wanted it. I think Waterloo runs the same way. So, and then we get a contract essentially. So like I get to be there for 3 to 4 years, and then we rotate someone else in. So anyone of minority that I know would be awesome to get in the schools, but those officers would also have to want to do it. And it is a very different type of work. So generally speaking, I would say most officers that go into police work, like this isn't, sorry, their cup of tea. There they are.
So do you have
Yep,
to be
and
a
that's-
police officer first before you become a okay.
Yes. And I would say generally, I mean, Ryan's been there forever, right? But
I'm old.
yeah, but I've been there for 6 years, and I worked patrol for 3 years first, and now I've been in the schools for 3 years. So
Okay.
it's kind of something you get into eventually. It wouldn't be like a first year's officer's assignment, more than likely.
Okay, last question for real. So what resources do you guys refer to students to? So you know, like I do domestic violence and sexual assault services, and one of the things we're trying to do is to get in the schools, you know, to help the students. I know you have social workers, you have the resource officers, but like if a student was to get, you know, report to you that a guy was wanting her to pay him for sex, or, you know, something related to the domestic violence or sexual assault, who are those resources that you refer to? And then how would, you know, and what other resources do you refer the children to, or are you able to do that?
Yeah, we are. And I would assume with Ryan as well, I work with the counseling department more than anything. So Riverview comes into our school, I think weekly. Pathways is there. So we can set up if I've had a kid that I think has been using drugs or things like that, without, like, we can try to get him into Pathways or her. Riverview, like I said, comes. Waypoints for single moms. So we have to use the crisis center. It was started to be an availability, and then the new place just opened in Waterloo.
Brownstones.
Brownstone, yep.
Yep.
And there's another one I'm thinking of.
So you guys have not heard of Amani Community Services? Because I know I've been to the police department, talked to the chief, gave out the information. I mean, I'm going to do this again, you know, because our Black students need this. I mean, there's Latino agencies for domestic violence and sexual violence. And so Riverview is not the only agency. I mean, there are mainstream agencies, but there's also culturally specific agencies that can deal with the students that are of that culture. But that's probably gonna be my job to get back down to the police department.
Yeah,
do that.
Lisa, I've definitely heard of it. And if we don't have any of the resources, like, do you have pamphlets and stuff that you can bring down?
Yep, yep.
Okay. Yeah, definitely come down someday, one of these days, and we can meet and get some of that stuff distributed out. And I can, definitely put some of that stuff up in my office. Lisa, I'm sure you could too, if you'd like to meet as well.
All right, well, that's some good questions from Lisa. She's on the front lines of dealing with many different family issues. Other questions that other people in the audience have? So you're, Julie, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with Liesl about, I really appreciated the information you gave about like how you work with kids and you mentioned that taking a restorative justice approach, the hope is to divert kids away from criminal activity, but that you didn't think that it actually had been reducing criminal activity, or maybe I'm not quite restating that right.
I would say that like my existence alone isn't doing that. And that's how I read the question. Having an SRO reduce criminal activity. Initially, no, I would say like it's still going to exist, but I would hope that we are reducing the number of juveniles that are entering the system, and that we're kind of another counseling approach of what could have happened. And if that makes more sense.
Sure. Yeah. And do you guys track numbers on that, either in Waterloo or in Cedar Falls?
I have just started using the diversion program 3 months ago. I just got access to it. So I have those numbers of how many we've diverted. And then I've been trying to do a good job at like logging my job so that there's a means to look back on the work that I'm doing. I think that there does, county wise, we've talked about it, like getting a good way to keep solid numbers and stuff like that. So that, but I know JCS does a great job. And so looking at JCS numbers, in a year from now that because they also got access to the program around the same time, I think will be interesting a year from now.
One thing that's happening nationally is that the number of youth being confined in the juvenile system, being basically imprisoned in the juvenile system, has dropped precipitously nationally, and I think in Iowa too. Why do you think that's happening? And does that affect your work in any way, that we're seeing this, which to me is a positive trend, but we're seeing that fewer and fewer kids are ending up in some way physically incarcerated in the system, unlike our adult system, where the incarceration rates in Iowa have stayed about the same, whereas they've dropped nationally, but in Iowa they've stayed the same. Do you comment on that?
My guess would be funding. If there's other reasons on the correction side, that there's probably a lot clearer answer, but I know like funding wise for everything, obviously there's just not a lot. There's not a lot of places to place kids that are being charged with crimes. So and I know that I think all JCSs in the state, there's there's bills that they're working on trying to just get kids back into their home and doing a different type of approach, whether that be probation, ankle monitor, whatever.
Right.
They're leaning on those resources instead of direct placement in a like juvenile detention center.
You want to comment on that, Ryan?
Well, and I think the juvenile detention centers being kept for those places keep being kept for the more serious crimes. Like I had an incident my very first year with a stolen handgun in my school in a backpack. So clearly, that's going to get a juvenile into the detention center for the more violent crimes, other than fighting, disorderly conducts or theft, anything, stuff like that.
what about a drug offense? How would that affect a kid? Like if they were, I mean, if it's grass or if it's some other drug, how would that affect them?
I couldn't tell you the last time I've taken anybody out to the detention center for weed or minor drugs.
I've never taken a kid to the detention center.
Okay.
So,
Well, and I think the research has shown the negative effect on kids of being incarcerated, and I think a lot of jurisdictions are trying to avoid that if at all possible. There's some really good research, and I'd say this to you guys and also to the general audience. The Sentencing Project has done some excellent research on the consequences of incarceration for juveniles, and they're trying to get juvenile incarceration reduced even more than it's actually gone down about 70% since 2010, and they're trying to get it reduced even more. So you might want to look at that research because it shows what they found to be that the negative consequences, and of course the other side of it is referring to adult court, and they're also trying to uh, make it harder for kids to be referred to adult court for offenses. So other questions that people have for our school resource officers?
I had one more question.
Yeah,
Um, Lisa, you said that if you had to, you said you wouldn't, but if you had to take a student, you said you would have to take them to the Waterloo jail, or did you mean the Cedar Falls jail?
we don't have a jail in Cedar Falls.
Oh, you don't?
No, so
Oh,
and
you just have like a sheriff office?
we just have like a book-in area.
Oh, okay.
So the only
Learn something new.
yeah, I know. Like, every kid that sees like our cells in the back, they're like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
Cedar Falls jail," and I'm like, "Nope, we gotta take everybody over to Waterloo."
Oh,
So
okay.
it definitely is. I mean, even for Ryan, it's kind of more of a process, and we only have to book kids in. So take them in, get a picture taken, that process if it's a serious misdemeanor or above.
Mm-hmm.
So unless if it hits that criteria, then we have to take them over. So I always, like I said, set it up with a parent. I have them follow me over to the jail and they park. I told them to park at Lederman's and I'll walk the kid out to their car when it's done. So the jail makes it a super smooth process. I'm in there with the kid the whole time. And it's just the formality that they have to be booked in if they're charged with a serious misdemeanor. But yes, I take them to Waterloo.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I learned something
and
new.
the Cedar Falls used to have some cells, I know, but I guess they got rid of them.
So we have cells, but they're only holding cells. They're not jail
Cells,
cells.
right?
So, yeah.
Brian,
Correction side, seeing a judge, all of that jazz has to happen over in Waterloo.
Waterloo, yeah. Brian, you want to comment on that or?
Along those lines as well, I have had to unfortunately take students out of the school. Sometimes just that you can't avoid handcuffing, but we've taken measures when in those instances where I've had to do that, where we've cleared the hallways and taken the quickest and most direct route out of the school. Obviously we don't want to embarrass anybody. We don't want to drag anybody through the school in handcuffs or anything along those lines. So we take measures to reduce the amount of people that can see that happen.
Other questions that people have? Well, if there are no other questions, we're finishing up a little early here, but we can. I want to thank you guys for being a part of our program, and it was very educational process, and I appreciate the positive role that y'all are trying to play with the schools and trying to avoid, uh, getting them involved in the legal system if at all possible. And I mean, I think that's important for juveniles to have chances to be for their behavior to be corrected without having to get any kind of a juvenile record or anything like that. And so that's very good. Any final thoughts or questions before we close things down for the evening?
Okay, one more.
All right, go, Lisa.
No, bro, I got too many questions. What happens if a student said that they either had a bomb or they knew someone did something under, something like that? What is the protocol for that in the schools? And then would you guys get involved in that as well or not?
Yeah, if there's any type of threat made with, usually they've come in by social media. That's what I've seen the most. You know, there's ways to find out through these social media companies, like on emergency basis, who the accounts belong to. You track it down to an email address, and you got to track down who the email address belongs to, and then track down like IP addresses and so forth, which and they usually end up coming back to a phone of some sorts. Then you got to track down who the phone comes back to. It's a long process, but that's usually the way things happen. Obviously, we let our administrators know, or a lot of times they're the ones that are letting us know. But just trying to track down the originator of those threats, those calls. And I've had one at East High School since I've been there, and which did result in a criminal charge.
So it doesn't matter if they're under 18, they still would get charged as an adult? Is that what you're saying?
No, they're not charged as an adult for that.
Oh, okay.
That's still a juvenile charge.
Oh, okay.
The only time a juvenile is basically not, I guess you could say, charged as an adult, forcible felonies, which are like your, homicide, willful injury, robberies, stuff like that. And that's what, if they're 16 and above, they can be charged, as an adult with that. And then then they're required to stay at the Blackhawk County Jail, be booked in there.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
And
No
I'd like
problem.
to say too, it's different than we usually think about, but when we charge people, so if I charge someone with a crime, we are always charging it as a juvenile level, and it's the courts. So it's not us. So like me and Ryan have no say, period, on whether someone gets charged as an adult or not. So I would write my complaint as I would no matter what, and it's the courts, the county attorneys that make all of those decisions, whether in the JCS, whether it gets waived to adult court. We have absolutely no say, and I probably wouldn't even be like notified if they got waived to adult court. So we have like no stand in that, the charge level.
It's just that's a prosecutor decision, not a
Yeah,
police.
that's totally part of the correction side. And I always tell kids, like, I hate to charge. This is it. I don't know what happens on the other side all the time. So like you may never see me again. We aren't a part of that.
One of the many vast areas of discretion that prosecutors have in terms of determining what gets charged and et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
but the
And there's
police,
criteria.
the police don't make that decision. I know.
We don't.
Okay. Other comments or questions before we, Christy, I see you joined late. Do you have any questions? Christy was helpful in setting all this up. I really appreciate it. She had another meeting that she found out at the last minute she had to go to. So, any questions?
No, I don't. I'm so glad my Hawkeye meeting got ended early, so I was able to take part in the second half hour. You guys are really doing a great job. I knew Ryan was. He's family, so but it's been really, I've learned a great deal.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for attending, and be sure to tune in for the 13th Amendment on the 13th. Got to be a really interesting discussion of are prisoners the property of the state, or the individuals that happen to be incarcerated. That's kind of the basic issue with the 13th Amendment. So please tune in if you're interested. And I'm going to shut off the recording now if I can remember how to do that.